Good morning, it's Brian. We are back on another phenomenal podcast with an incredible entrepreneur. This time we are winging our way all the way to Spain, and an incredible company which is dealing with one of the biggest problems that we're currently facing in the workforce today, and that is how do our employees communicate properly together, learn additional skills, become stronger and better while the entire world has sent everybody home. We were absolutely privileged and lucky to be able to invest in this company. I'm so pleased to be able to chat with my friend Monica this morning. Welcome, Monica.
Lovely. Brian, thank you very much, and it's great to be here.
It's awesome. And I love Squadra. And, a lot of the companies that we invest in, I like, obviously, because otherwise, why the hell would we be investing in those companies? But it's not just that I like what your company does. I love how you have driven your company forward. And you've come into this company as a female founder in another country, originally American, but you've gone all the way over to Europe. And I've lived in Europe. Like, it's not simple to go to an entirely different country with a different language to launch an innovation, which, by the way, is made for America. So when it hits hard in America, it's going to hit like a beast. But you've done it all. And that was the thing. I remember when we first spoke, and I got off the phone and I spoke to Jonathan over here afterwards. And I said, I just want to invest in her. I think what she will never ever give up. The company she's building is huge, but the journey is long. And your grit and your determination and your perseverance knows zero limits. Zero. Am I wrong?
Well, Brian, thank you for that really kind introduction, and I think I think you've hit on a lot of really great points about sort of the entrepreneurial journey and kind of the skill set that you need as an entrepreneur in order to be successful, to have even the remotest chance of success. And I think the two skills that you touched upon, resilience and grit, are really, really key here. And for me, these are skills that actually I've sort of been working to learn my entire life, my entire career. And when you talked about sort of having different experiences in different countries and sort of the adaptation and the adaptability that's required of any person to be able to, adjust to different circumstances, that's very much been my case. So just very quickly, I was born in India. My mother died when I was very young. My family emigrated then to the US. And after working in investment banking for the first part of my career, I actually sort of left that and took on another adventure, which was my first entrepreneurial gig. But it was because I sort of had built up that resilience and the ability to be flexible and adaptable to take on sort of that first entrepreneurial venture even before getting to launch Squadra. So
And actually,
Steve Jobs.
let me stop you for one
Please,
moment if I
please.
can, because and I very seldom focus on just female entrepreneurship in general, because it's not that I don't see no difference. I actually have a preference for female entrepreneurs to male entrepreneurs. Like, and I say it openly. I am a massive opposite bias person, and even though I don't even know if I'm allowed to in this country, I am. If I get a female and a male in front of me and both are exactly the same and both have got exactly the same business proposition, I will take the female every single day, because I just know that there's just a bunch of extra skills that you have that males don't have. But I do want to focus on an area here, which is that generally females get like something like 2% of the funding. So it's ridiculous. The amount of venture backable companies that reach unicorns, which are female focused, and actually they get the funding coming through, is just crazy and wrong and everything else, because all VCs, I believe, don't see that. But I'm guessing investment banking was kind of the same. And I'm guessing in that career, if I'm imagining what the room looked like, and I'm kind of guessing there's like 950 guys and probably a couple of women in there. And I'm just wondering, are there some kind of parallels to that and then the entrepreneurial journey itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually worked at JP Morgan in New York at a time when, and things have definitely started to change, although they have not changed anywhere near as much as they need to change. But when I was working in investment banking, you're absolutely right. I mean, the numbers that you sort of threw out there are not so far from the truth. It was, almost all male, and there were very few women in the room. So you sort of got used to the fact that, okay, the odds are a little bit stacked against me, and how am I going to react to that? Am I just going to sort of, kind of accept it, or is this an opportunity to actually not just lift myself up, but try to lift other women up in the process? And so that's another sort of kind of lesson that I learned very early on, that there are, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's banking, you are going to be up against sort of a mostly male world. And I think the other thing that sort of has really come to drive me, particularly focused on this issue of women and female founders that you raised, Brian, which I think is an excellent point, is that not only do I have sort of the female founder issue and struggles and challenges to deal with, some of the ones that you identified, but I'm also an older female founder. I have children who are teenagers. I've already done, I am a mother. I've raised a family, and so for me, when you talk about sort of what's the kind of the mission and the vision of the company, it's not only to do everything that you described in terms of helping individuals kind of discover their skills and build them within the context of a team, but it's also hopefully to show women everywhere that anything is possible if you just put your mind to it. And a startup founder not only does not have to be male wearing a hoodie, but they also don't have to be a female in their 20s. You can be an entrepreneur and you can be successful in this at any age.
And here's my message to investors. It's like, don't invest in women because you feel the world is unfair and things are tough and you should do the right thing. Forget that crap. You stay poor that way. Invest in women because they've gone through a heck of a lot more, right? So all these experiences that you go through, when I started the podcast by saying that you've got grit and resilience, it's not something that I believe that many of us are born with. I think we build it along the way based on the experiences we've gone through. And the more that we're prepared to take on really tough experiences where we know that they're going to be extremely unfair, whether it's like that kind of ratio within investment banking or starting up a startup as you're moving on in life and you've been a mom and you've had your kids and they've gone through, like, you just become a beast. And that was what I got off the phone with John and said, I'm like, she's a beast. She's going to break through no matter what. It doesn't matter. Like, forget energy. She's going to have energy of somebody who's like a quarter of her age. Forget like the ability to break through. She's got more experience than anybody has. Forget the energy. Her energy is beyond. And by the way, and you and me are the same, right? We're the same. We're not a million miles apart on age. We're not a million miles apart on experience and on things that we've done. But we have more energy than people a quarter of our age. So I'm saying to investors, like, invest in female entrepreneurs because statistically, there is a higher percentage return for you. You get more exits from a female entrepreneur, person per person, than you do from a male entrepreneur. So look, don't leave the males aside totally. We got a bunch in our cohort and they're very nice people, but don't be an idiot at the same time. Female entrepreneurs give you a better return. So now, we should talk a little bit about the company, but I did really want to get that out there, that this is an area, the reason we really focus on female entrepreneurs and even minority entrepreneurs is that there are these amazing entrepreneurs out there who are breaking through with phenomenal ideas like yours, which at the beginning, people notice a little bit later. So we just sneak in that tiny gap before they notice and before greed and FOMO and all those wonderful things kick in. And then we steal you away and we say, okay, we're going to invest in you. We're going to put $100,000 in you. We're going to want to make sure that we drive you forward all the way. And then possibly up to our 50 or 100K and then possibly up to an additional $1 million afterwards because I believe what you're doing. So let's talk a bit about Squadra and a bit about where the genesis of the idea came from and what it's going to develop into.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so in terms of Squadra, I mean, basically what we are is we are a every team's virtual coach. And we see an incredible market opportunity here, Brian, because there is no app that does this. So the only other apps that are remotely related to coaching essentially connect you with a human coach, right? They're sort of marketplaces and you can connect with a coach or a mentor. There is no app that exists in the market today that actually does the coaching for you right inside the app. And particularly because not only are sort of skills and skills development, reskilling and upskilling such a focus now, because there is just an incredible skills gap that's developed. And CEOs, actually, McKinsey just did a study, 87% of CEOs that they surveyed recognize that within their workforce, there's a very wide skills gap. And most of them, the majority of that 87%, overwhelmingly said, we really don't know how to address this. So a virtual coaching app that focuses on skills is, we believe, the answer. And what's particularly, I think, prescient is in this solution, Brian, is that right now the remote working, as we know, is not the new normal; it's the next normal,
Right.
and it is here to stay. And as you mentioned in your intro, it's creating an environment that is not particularly healthy. People are feeling isolated. They're feeling lonely. They're not able to sort of engage in those social interactions that they're used to in the workplace. And so, if we can combine the skills development together with greater communication, support among the team members, so that everyone is celebrating skills mastery together in a way that happens remotely, almost like if it were happening in presence, you can create an environment where the team, the individual and the team is much more motivated, much more connected, much more together, and therefore productive. And there's a lot of science behind this. So that's basically what the tool does. And in terms of kind of how I came to the project and the idea, it sort of goes back to what we talked about a little bit at the beginning, which is kind of my own personal journey. And so when I left J.P. Morgan, which was obviously a very secure, relatively high-paying job, my parents were like, "What are you doing?" But again, it was this sense of adventure, and there was something inside me that was just not fulfilled. With all respect to J.P. Morgan and all of the other investment banks and banking in general, I didn't feel that moving money from here to there was my life's calling. And so I had sort of this desire to create something. And at that point, I sort of had this passion for cooking. And I didn't really know how to cook at all. And so my partner at the time, who's now my husband, we left New York at a time when obviously investment banking and the markets were booming. And we started a restaurant in the Caribbean. Now, what's really interesting about that experience, Brian, is not so much that it was about cooking and the restaurant business. It was really about my discovery of all of our abilities to learn skills, teach ourselves anything that we want if we put our minds to it.
Right.
And that is a fundamental human character trait that is, it's hard to beat, and we all have it. And so discovering that about myself, that you can actually sort of discover your skills, build them, if you put your mind to it, was an incredibly eye-opening experience about our own human potential. And then fast forward, after the restaurant was sold with an incredible amount of hard work and dedication, the restaurant became successful.
And if I can just stick on the restaurant for a second. So, and as we're going through, and I love this hero's journey where we kind of go through the lessons that we have in life. What I really like about that is you're realizing the skills that you have, which are being underutilized. You are taking control of your life. And right now, and this is again another thing for me, which is huge about Squadra, is that we are living in a world, in my 51 years, I've never seen such a world of negativity. Everything. And I'm not just talking about the US election or things here. I mean, everywhere in the world. And we have COVID in one place. We have politicians who are focused on isolation and not allowing anybody in. We have some of the worst refugee crises and some of the worst humanitarian crises we've ever faced on the planet. We have people who are going home into marriages and relationships which are not good. We have got family relationships which are breaking down. And at the core of all of these is communication and control. Right? It's taking control of our lives and doing something which we were meant to do, and being able to communicate with the people around us to make sure that people are aware of the positive things, not the negative things that we're focused on. And so when you first approached me with Squadra and you said, the idea is this, is that there are all these people around you who can see that you're doing, or you can do, incredible things. And if they tell you enough times, then you'll realize that that's a skill that you have, and it's a skill that's worth developing. And then as you then develop that, I then realize additional skills that I want to get to take control of my life. And then the machine learning that you're going to build in, and this is where I believe your unicorn is going to come from, then starts to look for areas. Like, this is so amazing for people because, and I don't want to ruin the end of the movie here by giving it to everyone, but it's so, but when you mention control and that whole move to the Caribbean, I'm sure a bunch of people listening to this podcast are thinking, that sounds awesome. Like
And it was awesome.
You decided this is what I was meant to be. I was not meant to be sitting in a cubicle earning $1 million a year, $500,000, and spending $497,000, and then the next year earning 750 and being stuck in this terrible rat race which everybody's in. It's like, what am I incredible at? What's my potential? And what's the risk of me going out there and actually going after that potential, as long as I build up the skills to give me the best chance of that potential being achieved. So that's phenomenal. So you did that, you built it, and you sold it. What came next?
So after the restaurant, which by the way you mentioned, people listening will say it's like an amazing experience. I wish I could do that. And the answer is yes, you can. If I did it, anyone can do it. You really just have to sort of be open to adventure and whatever life is going to throw at you, with the belief that whatever comes your way, you're going to be able to handle it. After talking about resilience, just this little anecdote, Brian, we actually had an experience in the restaurant where there was it was a little Caribbean island, so you can imagine that all of the challenges that went along with it on a daily basis. But we had one time in particular where the local water company went on a strike for 100 days.
Whoa.
And this was during the tourist season, and obviously working in the Caribbean, you sort of have to make all of your money in a very, very short period of time during the year. And so we could not afford to close. We were, bootstrapped to the max. And so we found a way to actually rig up a system within the restaurant to take advantage of rainwater, because fortunately it was the raining season as well. And we just set up a system where we didn't have to rely on the external water source, and we could actually provide water for the restaurant every single night. So not one single day of that 100 days was the restaurant closed. And I'm really proud of that because, again, talking about your resilience and grit, if you put your mind to something, you really, really can do it. After
and by the way, on that point, for everybody listening, the definition of resilience and grit is not being calm when everybody else is losing their heads about them. That just possibly means you haven't noticed the severity of the situation, right? The definition of grit and resilience is when you execute a plan to overcome the challenges that you're facing without scaring the heck out of everybody else around you while you're doing it. Like, that's resilience and grit. Okay, so that type of idea is like, oh my God, we have a terrible problem coming. We can either wait, and this, by the way, ties directly into why investors should look at Squadra and Monica and say, this is a pretty sensational opportunity. It's not the idea that makes a unicorn. It is the execution of the idea all the way to the end during every single strike with water that will come to this particular company from now for the next 5 to 10 years, and how that entrepreneur reacts to that. So it speaks volumes.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point, Brian, because I think that, it is really all about attitude. And as I think, and as you mentioned in the very beginning, these are skills I've built since the time my mother died when I was very young. So it actually was a very sort of tragically fortunate opportunity that I was given to build resilience and grit from a very, very young age. And that is really what allowed me to leave JP Morgan, go on an adventure, teach myself to do something I had no idea how to do, survive the water strike, and build sort of this ability to whatever is going to be thrown at me, there is always a solution. It doesn't matter what the problem is, and it really is just a question of seeing it in that light. So after the restaurant, we actually had 2 children, and obviously had to think about sort of their education. And instead of kind of doing the easy thing, which was going back to the U.S., because that was a life we already knew, it was time for yet another adventure, which was, okay, let's move to Europe and give our kids an opportunity that we didn't have, which was to be multilingual, to experience different cultures and so on. And so we've lived here for the last 11 years. And actually Squadra, so the second piece of the puzzle, so sort of this ability to develop this discovery that we have within us, the ability to develop our own skills as long as we put our minds to it, was coupled with an experience that I had when I came to Barcelona, which was that I worked in education. And Brian, seeing every day the power that a teacher, mentor, professor, call them a coach, has on an individual's skills development, an individual's ability to fulfill their own potential, regardless of age. I happen to see it in the case of students, but this is true for lifelong learning, right? For adults as well. Because guess what? A lot of people in their 40s and 50s, Brian, have no idea what they're good at.
Yeah.
Because they have never had conversations around their own skills. Sure, they've done performance management reviews, but they don't focus on skills. So literally, you can go through your entire career and not really have a good understanding of what it is you're good at from a skill perspective, nor have you particularly worked or focused on those.
And it's such, by the way, it's such a great point, because if we look at the way companies manage, most companies manage through OKRs, objectives and key results, or KPIs, like key result indicators, key performance indicators, rather than the skills. It's very true. It's like a company will say, okay, what are the objectives we're trying to get to? Fine. How close are you to those objectives? What do we need to give you to get you closer? While actually, by looking at the soft skills and the hard skills, such as how do you communicate with customers, actually is the difference between that company being around for 5 minutes or being around for 50 years.
Totally.
Because you develop a culture within your company of the skills that you want to have there for your people to be happy and to be productive.
Brian, that's just that's an incredibly insightful point, because if you look at the McKinsey survey, right, what did they conclude when they went and asked about sort of what is the state of the skills gap within your organization? And the reason that 87% of CEOs said, ooh, this is a problem, we see it, is because our entire performance management system is built backwards. It's not forward-looking. So it's not about, hey, Brian, these are the skills that you're really good at. How do we really leverage those skills? And let's focus on the skills that allow you to do this job today, that job tomorrow, and this other job in 5 or 10 years' time, when the platform of the skills that are important and the technical skills for a particular task or role may change. Because guess what? In 5 or 10 years, AI and machine learning is going to take away a lot of the jobs that we have been so sort of narrow-mindedly focused on. Okay, Brian needs to do this job well. Well, tomorrow that job may not exist. Have we given Brian, through our process, the proper skills so that he can adapt, he can be flexible, he has a growth mindset to learn, he can be open to new ideas, he's creative, he's innovative, and so on. All of those skills that machine learning and AI will never replicate, we have not taken enough time to embed these skills and that learning, that love of learning into our employees. And this is the reason why we have a skills gap.
And I'll make one more point on this, stroke, ask one more question, and then I want to get to the genesis of Squadra. Although I think, not even the genesis, we've got the genesis. I want to get to the moment where it was like, are you kidding me? I have to do this. But when you look at these skills that folks are developing, it's not just a question, if you're an employer listening now, of saying, well, I'll pay my employee more money and that they're going to stay and they're going to be happy, or I'll give my employee time at home. That's not been proven to be the main reason why employees stay and are happy at work. The main reason is because of purpose and fulfillment. It's just that simple. If folks go into work and they feel like they're growing every single day and they're reaching a higher level of purpose and fulfillment, they will stay with you and love you forever. And even if they leave because they're drawn away for some reason, they will tell everybody else to be there. And everybody in your employ is going to be better people. So this is about building that real hierarchy of value for the employees within the company. And by the way, for the employer, as you're learning as well. This is a full 360 process. So you have to, and then as soon as you realize the importance of what I've just said there and what Monica has been saying, you realize that the entire future of work revolves around this idea of skill building. And it's not a question of, oh, is skill building going to be important or is it not? It's a no-brainer. It's about, is the particular skill building that Squadra has in place the absolute best skill building that can be done within organizations? That's the only question. So I want to get to Squadra. I want to get to that moment where you're in the educational system, you're realizing all of these points about employers. When was the moment where you're like, oh my God?
I think. Well, first, let me just touch on the point that you just made, Brian, because I think it's an important one. So, if you look at sort of the work of Daniel Pink, because you talked about sort of the difference between extrinsic motivation like compensation or gifts versus what intrinsically motivates us as human beings. And Daniel Pink has done a lot of work around this, and he basically came up with 3 factors. And those 3 factors we really try to embed within the product itself. So the first one is this concept of skills mastery. If I have the opportunity to develop my skills and become a master in skills that matter to me, that I care about, that's my number 1 human motivational driver. Number 2 is having autonomy over my own development. So rather than having a performance manager say, Brian, you really should be working on this, if those decisions are coming from you, it's fundamentally different in terms of the ability to motivate you. And the third is what you just mentioned, which is purpose. If I have purpose and if I'm working towards a goal together with my colleagues, my teammates, that combination of 3 things makes all of the difference. And there's a lot of science behind this in terms of your own motivation and therefore the team motivation and by extension, the productivity overall. Not just for the individual, not just for the team, but obviously for the organization as well. So in terms of your question about sort of when did I think I just have to do this? So I think, Brian, this is it's like, I think entrepreneurship and Squadra has also been very much an iterative process, just like our product itself. And Squadra actually started out, our MVP, which we started to monetize in 2019, was a team assessment tool. And it allowed you to sort of capture a radiography of each individual's skills. And I say it's an iterative process because we started to sell that to enterprise clients. We had some success. But because the sales cycle is very long, it's an extremely competitive market, team assessment, we then iterated to, and obviously the focus has always been around skills and skills development. But the real need that we actually saw, and this was really the eye-opener for me, again, via the iterative process, was to see that when we actually came into organizations like PwC, like Group Telefónica here in Spain, and did the team assessment, there was no way to actually develop those skills. They didn't have the learning platforms that were embedded into their daily workflow. They didn't have the team support. They didn't have the performance management systems that were focused very specifically on skills.
Wow.
And so there was where we identified the real need that this is not just about doing a radiography on Brian as a team member. This is actually about having sort of a coach kind of a persona that helps Brian develop those skills. And so that was sort of the aha moment for us. And it came via our own MVP because we started off as a team assessment tool. We then iterated based on the opportunity that we saw. There's a hole in the market that's not being fulfilled.
Amazing. And then what did you do? How did you actually go from that idea to saying, now we're going to build something? Because that's the hard bit. Somebody said to me yesterday, I have an idea. How do I protect my idea? Your idea is worth nothing. Everybody has an idea, right? It's the execution of that idea, which is unbelievably difficult. So talk to us about how you actually made that happen.
Yeah, so in late in 2019, we made a strategic, actually because the enterprise sales cycle is very long, as you very well know, and a lot of the listeners will know as well, we started running out of money. And so we had to make a decision about whether or not we were going to stick with the enterprise team assessment platform, or again, this is a problem, this is a challenge, how are we going to handle it? Are we just going to say, okay, well, this didn't work to the degree that we needed it to work, therefore we just sort of give up? Or do we say, no, there's a real opportunity here, and we've actually identified it via our own tool. Therefore, what do we need to do to pivot to this model that is a freemium, it's 100% remote, and it is much more focused on development instead of just identification. And so we pivoted the product in January of 2020. It turned out to be the best decision we've ever made for 2 reasons. Number one, we then were accepted into a phenomenal accelerator program that is based both in the US and Europe. It's called the Venture City.
Great guys.
And it is just outstanding. And their focus is really product data and engineering.
Yeah.
And what they helped us do, it's a 5-month long program. What they helped us do was really build a product in the right way, with a product-led growth approach like Slack, like Zoom, and really understand what is the user journey and what are the different value points where we can deliver value to users. So that pivot was extremely timely from the standpoint of the Venture City and all of the learning and building and growing that we were able to do and embedded in the product. But also, Brian, in March, COVID hit. And we had literally just pivoted to a 100% remote solution for
Beautiful.
teams.
Beautiful.
So I pinch myself. Obviously, COVID has been, an extremely tragic situation for the world over. But in this particular instance, the shift to remote working, which is obviously not going to go away tomorrow, was extremely timely for us, because just having pivoted to a remote tool, the timing could not have been better for us.
No, and I'll make an extra point onto this. I believe people have been lonely in their workplaces for an awful long period of time. And I think people have been struggling in their workplaces, and they've been surrounded with these big grey walls with other people around them without really understanding what to do. And what COVID just made it really obvious was that if folks are going to go home and they're going to be isolated, they're going to need help. They're going to need to develop these skills. Actually, they needed it all the time. They probably don't even need it more now than before. It's just that everybody realized it. That realization suddenly fell like a brick coming out of the top floor of a building and landed on the ground with we have no choice. We have to do this immediately. So that customer, and where it's really interesting from a product development perspective, is that there are a number of layers of developing the most awesome product on the planet. I mean, that first one is what you talk about, that whole Steve Jobs focus of making sure that human-centric design is absolutely perfect. But then the second part of it is unbelievably important, which is, and even unbelievably difficult, which is changing the human behaviors to actually adapt, to make sure that they appreciate that the damn product is great for them in the first place, right? So what just happened was, as you finished going through that incredible, and I call it an evolution even more than a pivot, but when you went through that incredible evolution, you turned the product, you brought the beautiful human-centric design to be absolutely right for fit for use. It was almost like the world changed the dynamics of the behaviors of people to say, they need to have this, so let's make it really obvious that that's the case. So it was just perfect timing with an already absolutely excellent application.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the timing, I think, I often say that the universe was just, the stars were just aligned for us. The universe was helping us in its own way, in the sense that the remote working and the remote trend highlighted some of these gaps within teams, and some of a lot of the need for managers to look for other ways to connect the team, to motivate the team, to help the team be productive and happy above all, which is really the key. Because if we're happy and we feel joy in our work, which again comes back to the factors that really motivate me as an individual, as a human being, if I feel like I am working on something that's important to me, that's purposeful, and I'm doing it with people that I really enjoy, that I can connect with, these are the fundamental factors that will make me more productive. And I think the whole push towards remote working has just highlighted the need to really focus on both the individual and team. What are their needs? And this is why the fact that we've really tried to incorporate the human motivational drivers within the product, I think, are key. Because to your point, Brian, this is not about convincing anyone of anything or necessarily shifting behaviors, because that's hard to do. But what we are trying to do is unlock natural human motivational drivers. And if we can do that, that is really the key here. So it's not about shifting behaviors. It's actually really helping you be yourself. That is ultimately what this product is all about.
Yeah, in a very passive way. And then so you built the product, you made it perfect for consumption, you got the product out to market, you then had the market turn around and say, we are ready for this right now. So I want to get to the final segment of the show, which is about the traction and about that road to becoming a unicorn. And again, for most of the show, most of the people who are listening here are investors. And those investors are listening, are thinking to themselves, okay, we want a great entrepreneur. We're very comfortable. Like Monica's got the grit and the perseverance to make this happen. She's done it with multiple businesses before and obviously done it throughout her life. We can see that it's an international type product. Everybody has an understanding about how the product works. But we also know that until you either, to actually make it to be a unicorn, you need to be able to build your users from 5 or 10,000 a month to 100,000 a month to 1 million a month to maybe even 10 million a month, who knows. And then once we've got there, it's like tick in the box, it's a unicorn. Us investors are all going to walk away and we're going to have a nice party in an Irish bar. So can you speak a little bit to how that's going to happen?
Absolutely. So we're actually, in fairness, Brian, our V2 product is 4 months old. It has been actually on the market with a freemium version for 4 months. And within those 4 months, we actually have built, I think, traction that I'm super pleased with. And I think it really sets the pace for what is to come. So, for example, we just onboarded about 200 police academy users in Spain and in Catalonia. And a public
Incredible.
sector in Spain is not an easy get. I mean, that is just not an easy get. But we did get them, and they love the tool. We're obviously now, I think, the idea is they love it. Not only will they expand, so for example, the 200 will become 1,200 in January, which will be the entire police academy incoming class.
Amazing.
And it covers firemen, it covers the civil guard, a whole spate of sort of police-related functions here within Catalonia. We also have another province called Castile and Leon, which is also in sort of pre-contract phase. We have another large insurer already on board. We have several companies in the pipeline that are kind of in the let's stay one step before pre-contract. And so the idea is that we are just really trying to push the tool and the product out to as many as possible in a very targeted way. So enterprise through our partner here in Spain, and then SMEs and startups through multiple kind of go-to-market strategy channels. And what we're really trying to do is find low-cost paid acquisition that we then combine with organic growth to get to, our goal is 10,000 users by the end of this year. And then depending on what channels really allowed us to get to that growth, get to that level of users, double down on those particular strategies, and then go from 10,000 to 100,000.
Excellent. And then what about the US expansion? Because I think it seems to me that should be the biggest market, right? Or am I wrong?
No, that's absolutely right. And so I think here's where Expert DOJO. So we've actually been incredibly fortunate, and I think this is really my life story. I've been incredibly fortunate in many, many things. Because the universe is always like there, right, in support. And in our particular case, so not only did we have the advantage of having the Venture City Accelerator program, but right after that, we were accepted into Expert DOJO. And they're actually completely complementary programs, because while the Venture City focuses on product and engineering, Expert DOJO focuses on investor fundraising, funding, and growth, particularly in the U.S. market. So with your help, the idea is that we're really going to be able to launch in the U.S. and grow and get to that 100,000 users. Because I think, Brian, once we get to 100,000 users, we will be at, obviously, product market fit is a continuum, and you never actually get there. It's always kind of moving, and you're moving as well, and you're constantly iterating. But I think even when we get to 10,000 users, we will be close enough to product market fit. We will have paid users and paid customers like the Police Academy, like a lot of other large organizations, together with SMEs and startups that we're focusing on the freemium model. And I think that will sort of be the key for our sort of US expansion. because we'll be ready for that sort of growth.
I
And the
agree.
other thing is, that I think one of the great things about our remote tool is that it allows for very easy integrations. Because the key here is that users don't have to go outside of their workspace to actually use the tool. So right now we are integrated with Slack, which is again going to be a factor in terms of getting to that 10,000 and then getting to the 100,000. And then we can also very easily integrate with, for example, Microsoft Teams, which is the preferred tool used by enterprise, plus Google Calendar. Now, you might say, okay, but why are you thinking about integrating with Google Calendar? It's a fundamentally important integration because once we know who you're meeting with and who you're having interactions with as a team, as individual team members, now we can actually design the coaching and the coaching tips to be very, very personalized based on that interaction. So each interaction now fundamentally changes and it becomes much more positive because we're intervening and helping each of the individuals within that meeting to be much more, to have just a better interaction.
No, it's going to be huge. And I want to finish it up with one last question. Before I make the question, I want to make a statement. We invest in companies because A, we want to support early stage startups, but B, and from an investor perspective, because we want to make extraordinary returns by backing the right startups. So when we put our money into Monica, we put our money into Monica in the knowledge that we had the opportunity of being part of $1 billion company. You know, I see Slack and we see what happened to Slack and it became a multi-billion dollar company because many of the user efficiencies that Monica is building into her product were already built into Slack. And it was very easy for companies to be able to adopt that and to bring it on board. And we believe that what Squadra have in place has the ability to be able to do that. Now, there's also the ability to lose money if the company doesn't make it through, but that's where the trade-off comes. You win, you get a 500 times or maybe 100 times or maybe 1,000 times return, which is ridiculous. You lose, you don't. So the decision to invest is based on belief in a product and a company and a founder, and when that meets greed and FOMO. And if you wait too late, then you invest when the company is 100, 200, 300, 400 million dollars in value, and you get a much smaller return. But if that belief is there early enough and you get the right company and the right founder, which we believe Monica is, then you can make great returns. So can you speak just in this last point to how much you're raising right now, the valuation of the company, if you'd like to share the valuation. If not, that can be talked about afterwards, and just where the opportunity is for the investors. And I'll leave you with the last word.
Thank you, Brian. So we're raising a round of 500K in Q4 of this year. And the idea of this round is really to get us to what I just described as product market fit, which is that 10,000 users, 1,200 paying customers at a minimum, which is a conversion rate of 12%. And we actually think, now just for comparison, Slack's conversion rate from free to paid is 30%. So that's actually a relatively conservative conversion rate. And our goal is to get to what Slack is doing at around 25 to 30%. This one of the things I'm really proud of, Brian, is that we have built and this is maybe going back to my restaurant days, right? I know how to build an incredibly highly capital efficient business model. And that has brought us through. It has brought us to where we are already starting to monetize the product and so on with very little cash having been raised. I'm really proud of that because I think, entrepreneurs need to struggle because this is really hard. And you need to be able to, I think, do a lot with relatively little. And then when the time is right, i.e. when you've achieved when you're closer to that product market fit, to then really spend and scale very quickly, because the window of opportunity that we have, Brian, is now. For all of the reasons that we've talked about, the opportunity is now. There is no other tool like this in the market. The opportunity in terms of remote working is here. And we don't know what the 2 years from now is going to look like. So it really is, this funding is to allow us to move very quickly through that window.
Okay, investors, you all heard it here. Monica, how can everybody contact you?
Through email, monica@mysquadra.com.
Which is SQUADRA.
Right, with a my in front of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, beautiful. So you all know where to contact her. I hope this has been as engaging for everybody listening to this as it has been for me to be a part of Monica's life over the last 3 months. We will be working with her all the way through. And as I said it right at the very beginning, we invested in this company because we believe in Monica, we believe in my Squadra, we believe in what it's going to do over the next 5 to 10 years, and we couldn't be happier to be on the journey. Monica, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brian.
And that's a wrap.